Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session titled Pell Grant Expansion, Higher Education Opportunities for Individuals, presented by Jennifer Thomsen. My name is Kevin Moranci. I will be moderating this session. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. We welcome comments, questions, and engagement, so please use the chat feature to let us know your thoughts. I will be tracking the questions and will present them to our speaker at the end of the session. Please make sure you are muted and use and follow the hashtag MoEquity2023 on your social channels to keep the conversation going beyond this event. The session is being recorded and the department will make it, along with the presentation materials, available for viewing and sharing later. And now I'm going to hand it over to our speaker, Jennifer Thomsen, who is a principal consultant at Education Commission of the States. Jennifer, please take it away.
Great, thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning. I am going to share my screen with you. Hey, can you all see my screen there? No, not yet. Go?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me today. Again, my name is Jennifer Thomsen. I'm a principal consultant at Education Commission of the States. I have been in education policy for many years as a staffer for the Colorado legislature, as an independent consultant, and also as a member of the policy team at Education Commission of the States. And I'm joining you from very beautiful sunny Denver, where we're enjoying unseasonably warm weather. I'm excited to have the opportunity to share with you all our knowledge on Pell Grant expansion and how it will impact access to higher education for incarcerated students. And before we dig into the content, though, I want to take just a minute or two to talk a little bit about Education Commission of the States and how we support state education leaders, particularly for those of you who may be unfamiliar with us. At Education Commission of the States, we serve as a partner to all state education leaders. That includes governors' offices, legislators, state boards of education, and higher education officials by providing them with personalized support, nonpartisan information, and opportunities for collaboration. We cover issues for the full spectrum of education, from early learning through post-secondary and the workforce, all while remaining unbiased and nonpartisan. We believe in the power of learning from experience because we know that informed policymakers create better education policy. We use our research and knowledge of state approaches and promising practices from across the country to help policymakers make better informed decisions about what might work in their states. We do this in a variety of ways, through research, publishing reports, hosting convenings, and providing counsel. We research and report on trending education topics and bring state education leaders together to collaborate and learn from one another in our convenings. We have a deep bench of policy professionals that stand ready to assist, and I'm looking forward to talking with you today. So let's dive right in. In December of 2020, in the FAFSA Simplification Act, Congress lifted a nearly 30-year ban on Pell Grants for incarcerated students. Pell reinstatement began in July of this year and has the potential to expand access to higher education for thousands of incarcerated people for whom a key obstacle to higher education is cost. So before we dig into the details of Pell expansion, I want to talk a little bit about why access to higher education in prison matters. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, in 2021, the number of people under the jurisdiction of state or federal correctional authorities was 1.2 million nationwide, with about 23,000 of those in Missouri. Student participation in educational programming in prison, we know, has some far-reaching positive impacts, including improved safety in correctional facilities. The presence of educational programs in carceral settings has had a clear impact on overall prison culture, reducing violent incidents and promoting positive behaviors, both among the participants and the non-participants, which can create a safer working condition for staff and safer living environments for incarcerated people. It also has a positive impact on public safety. A vast majority, about 95% of incarcerated people do eventually return to their communities. In Missouri, this is about 19,000 people re-entering communities each year. Nationwide, recipients of education programming during incarceration are up to 48% less likely to recidivate than their peers. There's also a cost savings associated with decreased recidivism. Studies have shown that every dollar invested in prison education yields $4 to $5 in taxpayer savings from reduced incarceration costs. And while these practical impacts are important, there are important human impacts as well. Studies have documented a really widespread and profound effect on program participants' sense of purpose, dignity, and self-efficacy. For example, research has shown that participants in prison education programs demonstrated increased self-esteem and reduced feelings of loneliness and depression compared to similarly situated peers who did not participate. They became positive role models in prison and developed new perspectives and goals. Post-secondary education in prison is an opportunity for self-reflection and can really positively influence people's future choices. There may also be racial equity and intergenerational impacts. Post-secondary education is an avenue for upward mobility, especially among people of color who disproportionately make up the prison population. And additionally, post-secondary programs during or after prison provide people with knowledge, skills, and connections they can use to benefit their children and families, multiplying the impact of a single college degree. Evidence suggests that post-secondary education participation may help disrupt intergenerational cycles related to incarceration. Education programs can result in a successful re-entry into the community, one important component of which is employability. About 70% of jobs in 2027 will require some post-secondary education or training beyond high school, but nationwide, only about 6% of incarcerated people have attained an associate's degree or higher. And while formerly incarcerated people continue to face stigma in hiring processes, early research suggests that participation in correctional education does boost students' odds of attaining employment post-release. And then finally, there are workforce benefits. Educational programs that are aligned to community workforce needs have the potential to help fill skilled labor gaps. And as noted in the Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development's strategic plan there in Missouri, demand for workers with some form of post-secondary credential is higher than the number of people in the state with those credentials. So ensuring access to post-secondary education in prison may help move the needle on the state's big goal target of 60% of residents having some form of post-secondary credential by 2030. So a bit of history. When incarcerated students' access to federal student aid was revoked nearly 30 years ago, it left people in prison without a reliable or consistent source of money for post-secondary education. Incarcerated people earn very little for the work they do in prison, and they often come from economically challenged families. And this makes it difficult for them to afford post-secondary education without some financial support. And so recognizing the impact of the loss of Pell eligibility for people in prison, in 2015, the U.S. Department of Education launched the Second Chance Pell Experimental Sites Initiative, which in 2016 enabled 67 colleges and universities to partner with prisons, authorizing them to administer Pell Grants to incarcerated students enrolled in their post-secondary programs. The program grew a lot, and by this year, more than 200 colleges in 48 states and the District of Columbia participated in Second Chance Pell, including some prison education programs in Missouri that served more than 1,500 students in that time. The initiative was designed to test whether participation in high-quality education programs increases after expanding access to financial aid for incarcerated individuals, and with a goal of helping those individuals get jobs and support their families when they're released. The program funded the approved higher education institutions directly, although those funds didn't always cover the full cost of the program. And some of the teaching formats under Second Chance Pell included on-site, in-person instruction, as well as online and hybrid programs. Earlier this year, the Vera Institute of Justice published a report summarizing the reach of these Second Chance Pell programs. They found that between 2016 and 2022, more than 40,000 students enrolled in post-secondary education through the Second Chance Pell Initiative, with nearly 12,000 credentials earned. In that time, as I said, nearly 12,000 students earned a credential, which was either an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or a certificate or diploma. Note that the decrease in 2021, as you can guess, is probably attributed to challenges related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some or many colleges had to suspend their programs at that time. So remember the benefits of access to higher education in prison that I described a few minutes ago? This report did find that those things were true. Facility safety and public safety improved. Students in prison education programs reported feeling a greater sense of purpose, of dignity, and self-efficacy. And early research suggests that participation in correctional education boosts students' odds of attaining employment post-release, which again is a critical part of successful reentry into their communities. So building on the success of Second Chance Pell experimental sites, the FAFSA Simplification Act reverses the ban on Pell Grants for students in approved prison education programs in state and federal prisons. And it eases some of the hurdles students who are incarcerated face when they're applying for financial aid. In addition to provisions that make it easier for all prospective students to apply for financial aid, the FAFSA Simplification Act reinstates these Pell Grants, as I mentioned, for incarcerated students that would otherwise be eligible for Pell to attend these approved prison education programs. And it does include a broader set of students now, those in prisons, jails, juvenile and civil commitment settings who are enrolled or accepted into a qualifying prison education program. The law is sentence blind, which means that all incarcerated people are eligible regardless of conviction or sentence length. Previously, people with certain drug-related convictions could not qualify for Pell, and the law removes that restriction, making it easier for more students to qualify. In October of last year, the U.S. Department of Ed published final regulations that provide a framework for how to implement Pell reinstatement and how to ensure high quality post-secondary education in correctional facilities. The regulations outline the steps that post-secondary institutions must follow to create prison education programs that are eligible for Pell Grant funds. And in addition, the regulations require data collection and reporting to the U.S. Department of Ed in its assessment of program outcomes. Many of the regulations do build on the lessons learned from the Second Chance Pell Experimental Sites Initiative. So there's a multi-step process that prison education programs are going to need to follow to be allowed to access incarcerated students' Pell funds. It includes an initial 2-year period of access to the funds, during which college accreditation agencies evaluate the prison education program and conduct a site visit. And then at the end of the period, the corrections agency where the program is located, which you're going to hear me refer to as the oversight entity, must complete an assessment to determine whether the program is operating in the best interest of students. And if the program is determined to be doing so, the oversight entity can then give final approval. Here it is in just a little bit more detail. The application process does require a robust upfront review to ensure that the programs are effective and meet pre-approval standards. So to be eligible for Pell Grants, prison education programs must first apply to become a partner with the correction agency. And then once the partnership has been established, the college that's running the program has to initiate a process with their accreditor to add the correctional facility as a new location of their college. Then after the college has the approval, it applies to the U.S. Department of Education to become an approved prison education program. If the department approves the program, the college will be authorized to administer Pell Grants to incarcerated students. As I've mentioned, as part of the final approval, within 2 years of that initial approval, oversight entities have to assess whether a prison education program is operating in the best interest of students. And there are 4 input indicators that must be considered and 6 outcome indicators that may be considered. Though the oversight entities do have some discretion in their final approval evaluation, the regulations do require them to assess certain criteria in determining whether a prison education program is operating in the best interest of students. First is whether the experience, credentials, and turnover rates of the prison education program instructors is comparable to the rest of the college. Second, whether the transferability of credits and applicability of credits toward degree programs are substantially similar to those of other programs within the college. Third is whether educational programming, career advising, and support services provided to students in the program are comparable to those offered on the college's campuses. And finally, whether the college ensures that all formerly incarcerated students are able to fully transfer their credits and continue their programs at any location of the college that offers a comparable program. And in addition, although not required, oversight entities may assess the following outcome indicators as part of this best interest determination: whether recidivism rates meet any threshold set by the oversight entity, job placement rates, expected earnings, completion rates, the ability of students to continue their college education post-release, and any other criteria that the oversight entity determines are pertinent. The regulations also require the oversight entity to use a feedback process in making the best interest determination. It has to consider input from stakeholders, including organizations that represent incarcerated people, representatives of incarcerated students, state education offices, and accrediting agencies. And oversight entities can include other stakeholders if they choose. There are a number of other provisions of the FAFSA Simplification Act that may be of interest. And among them are a requirement that prison education programs that offer professional licensure must be designed to meet the educational requirements of the state where the correctional facility is located. And for federal prisons, it's the state where most people will live after release. If the state prohibits formerly incarcerated people from qualifying for licensure or employment in a specific field, the program can't enroll incarcerated students in that licensure program. Here I would just note that in Missouri, the Fresh Start Act enacted in 2020 does prohibit occupational licensing boards from denying a license due strictly to criminal history unless they committed a crime that's directly related to the occupation. So the expansion of Pell eligibility to students who are incarcerated is a really big deal. It certainly will increase access to post-secondary in prison, but may not be enough to address all the barriers that students face. In many cases, Pell Grants don't cover the full cost of attendance, but there may be opportunities for students to access state need-based financial aid as well, although it's not available in every state. In 2020, Education Commission of the States looked at the 2 largest state financial aid grant programs in each state to identify whether students impacted by the justice system were eligible. The scan included both people enrolled in prison education programs and people with prior criminal convictions who were enrolled in post-secondary programs outside of prison, which in our analysis we refer to as system-impacted students. What we found was that in 19 states, the state aid programs link their eligibility directly to Pell eligibility. So what that means is that this federal policy change is likely to have an immediate impact on policies governing some state aid programs. Just as an example, the Access Missouri Financial Assistance Program disqualifies students who have pled guilty or been found guilty of a drug offense that would make them ineligible for Pell. So that tie to Pell eligibility is there. State leaders in any of these states may choose to leave intact the policies linking eligibility to state aid to Pell eligibility, which could potentially increase the number of students eligible for state aid. Or they may choose to enact laws or regulations aimed at limiting student eligibility for the state programs. We found that 17 states plus the District of Columbia don't place limitations on eligibility in either of their 2 largest aid programs. This means that at least within the financial aid policy itself, students who are incarcerated are not explicitly excluded. The change in the federal policy doesn't erase barriers that may still exist that preclude students' ability to access aid programs while they're incarcerated. And one of those big things is they don't all have access to higher education programs in prison. Generally, not every facility offers them. We found that in at least 54 of the 100 largest financial aid programs across the country, students will continue to be ineligible for state financial aid even after the Pell expansion. And this is because the state law or regulation contains specific language about students who are incarcerated or who have past criminal conviction or certain drug-related convictions. And if states seek to mirror the federal policy development, new laws or regulations will need to be enacted. And just a quick reminder that our analysis did include both people enrolled in prison education programs and people with prior criminal convictions who were enrolled in programs outside of prison. So students do face a lot of other barriers in accessing high quality education in prison, and I'll mention just a few of those here. FAFSA completion is required to determine Pell eligibility. And in addition, to determine eligibility for a lot of state financial aid programs. And students who are incarcerated face a lot of hurdles in completing FAFSA. They may have little or no internet access. They may face a lack of support in filling out paper applications and little post-secondary or no post-secondary transition support. And in addition, it may be difficult for these students to access the financial information and documentation they need to complete the form. Another issue is lack of access to learning resources that we really take for granted outside of prison. And this includes books, computers, internet access, all things that are heavily restricted in carceral settings. In addition, instructors need to work with corrections security protocols while planning and teaching their classes. It can also be really challenging for students to find spaces that are designed to support learning and educational needs, things like classrooms, libraries, scientific and computer labs. All of these things can play a role in the quality of educational experiences. And another potential issue faced by students who are incarcerated is transfer to different correctional facilities. Many incarcerated students enrolled in post-secondary education are transferred to other prisons during their sentence for reasons outside of their control. And sometimes they're transferred to facilities that aren't equipped to allow them to continue along their same learning pathway, or even to prisons that don't have post-secondary programs at all. So when students are transferred, they effectively are withdrawn from a course. And so then they may be categorized as non-completers, which could jeopardize future funding and also enrollment eligibility at participating post-secondary institutions. There are other barriers they face as well. Those are just a few I wanted to highlight. So I want to end the presentation sort of right back where we started. We know student participation in educational programming in prison has far-reaching positive impacts for facility and public safety. It has positive impacts on participants' sense of purpose, on their dignity and self-efficacy. It has implications for racial equity and intergenerational cycles of incarceration and educational attainment. And it's a factor in successful reentry into the community upon release. And it can even help ease workforce shortages. This is good news, not just for the 19,000 formerly incarcerated people reentering Missouri communities each year, but also for those communities and for the state. Pell expansion is really going to be an important driver of increased access to quality post-secondary education in prison programs. So thank you. I appreciated the opportunity to be here with you today, and I'm happy to respond to questions or have a conversation with you all. Thank you.
All right, Jennifer, thank you. We actually had a whole another half hour yet. If you had anything else that you wanted to discuss, please feel free to do so. If anybody has any questions, yeah, please do put them in the chat over there. I'll give you a few minutes to think of something to ask and put in the chat.
If I may, I'd like to just add a comment and appreciation.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Jennifer, thank you so much for your presentation. And certainly, I'm a longtime fan of ECS and a former resident of Denver, so it's good to see you, and I hope all's going well over there. The thing I wanted to add is that here in Missouri, there really is an effort in 2023 reentry program. Our State Department of Corrections has signed in with the federal program, U.S. Department of Justice, and our department is a partner with them. And so your topic is just very timely. Here in Missouri, we have over 1,000 parolees are released every month. right into the workforce. And so you have touched on to something that's very important to us as Missourians. How do we help prepare and to do that? So I just want to toss that in, that you really touched on some very important priorities for us as a department here in Missouri. How do we better serve these Missourians who are looking to, just as you pointed out, they want to get on with their lives and they want to have a good start and they want to be successful. And there's all the research shows these are triple wins. Why would we not want to do this well? So I just want to give you that comment and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think there are a lot of important conversations to be had here. I think, as I said, it is going to have a really big impact in access to post-secondary education programs for folks who are incarcerated. And I think because of the disparate entities that are involved, we have higher education entities, we have institutions of post-secondary education, the corrections folks, all coming together and collaborating for with these programs to provide this high quality access to them. It's just important to sort of get everyone to the table and talking about these things. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that, and I hope that we can figure out ways to start those conversations to make sure that that these students are well served. So yeah, thank you for that.
I was at a gathering and I ended up having a conversation. As you point out, certain prisoners get transferred and they end up stuck in a situation where it's hard for them to complete. And a lot of this comes down to the work of the wardens. The wardens are kind of one of those crossroad individuals that have a lot to say, as well they should, as to what's going on in their prison. I was talking to a former warden just by coincidence. We ended up in a chat, and he was talking about they like to see these well-organized programs. It helps provide incentives for prisoners to plan ahead and to think about life beyond the walls. And it helps change the culture within the walls, that there's something hopeful, something to be thinking ahead to how do they help prepare themselves more than just dealing with day to day in that unpleasant environment by design. But it gives them something better to work with. And so he was saying that any warden who is trying to organize and handle this situation are looking for good partners, and they want to see something well organized. And certainly they need certain, parameters, and they've got all kinds of things they have to work with to make these things work. They're not easy, but he said you would generally find willing partners of how to do this well. So thank you again.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. And I think often we frame discussions around the benefits to society, rightfully so, to public safety and to, meeting workforce needs and all of those needs. But yeah, I think it's very, very important to remember sort of those human aspects of it as well. So yeah, I appreciate that.
While I'm here, I'll back out and let the conversation continue. Kevin, thank you. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Boggs. Thank you for the interesting commentary there. Jennifer, you as well. So we do have a couple questions in the group chat, if you would allow me to read those. The first one we have here is from Sydney. She asked, with the expansion of Pell Grants and greater access to higher ed in prisons, are states changing their licensing laws as well? She also adds, in a lot of states, if you are convicted of a variety of crimes, you are ineligible for certain certifications or licensures.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And that can be a stumbling block. I mean, having a person participating in an education program that they think is going to help them when they get out, only to get out and find out that they don't qualify for a license for that particular profession is a big issue. I have not seen in my tracking in this past legislative session states making big changes to their occupational licensing, but I can imagine that you know, as states are thinking about their workforce goals and their workforce needs, I think that's, you know, something certainly that we could anticipate happening. I would just note that there are states that, like Missouri, have these second chance laws in place that really do limit prohibitions of folks getting certain professional licenses due to criminal history, limiting that to only being able to deny licensure for someone whose criminal conviction is directly related to that particular occupation. So there definitely has been some movement in that way over a number of years. And I think we'll have to continue, continue to see that for those, for these programs to have an impact on the workforce. Did I answer the question? I think I did. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate that. So we do have another question in the group chat. This is from Samantha. She asked, what do you see as the role of SHIO agencies like the Missouri Department of Higher Education and Workforce Development in this process?
Yeah, I think it's a thing that makes these programs complicated, is that there are a lot of different entities who are involved in making sure all the things that need to happen. So I think we immediately think of the Department of Corrections. Obviously, for one thing, the State Department of Corrections is the oversight entity of these programs, but there does need to be cooperation with and partnership with state departments of higher education, as well as the colleges and universities who are providing the programs, and the facilities themselves. And so I think what departments can do, number one, is make sure they're partnering. All the right people are at the table, I guess I would say. Make sure that those partnerships are happening. I guess another thing I would say is recognizing that the goals of a SHIO agency, a higher ed agency, and a Department of Corrections are probably slightly different. Understandably so. The goal of corrections may be, ensuring safety and different things than what we think about, especially when we think about higher education agencies whose goals are more around completion and workforce readiness for a different population of students, right? This population of students is smaller and one that is often overlooked. And so I think the role of each of these different entities that has their hands in this, while the roles are distinct, I think the need for collaboration is really there. I'm not sure I answered that in a wonderful way. But hopefully that helps.
No, you did great. Okay, we do have another question here. This is from Tia. And they asked, are there any initiatives to encourage those necessary partnerships and collaborations?
Well, I think I don't know that I've seen any sort of large movement to do that. One thing I think is important, well, a lot of things are happening in states, I think, that are specific to state contexts and are specific to how interested a state is in this particular topic. At the federal level, there's not really an oversight entity over these programs, which can make it challenging to sort of provide a really broad, overarching set of goals or guidance, I guess I would say. So a lot of work is happening state to state, is very state dependent. And some states have been kind of innovating, I guess I would say, in their governance of these programs, which I think has helped with some of those collaborations, maybe consolidating the oversight a little bit, or Tennessee is an example of a state that has done some sort of innovative work around governing these programs. And I can't claim to be able to speak, unfortunately, very eloquently on that, but I'm certainly happy to provide additional information. But I think it's sort of in terms of big picture encouragement of doing these collaborations. I don't know that I think that exists other than on sort of a state-by-state basis. I will say, though, that we know the philanthropy community has been very interested in this issue recently. And in fact, ECS has just received a grant from Ascendium and ECMC to do some work in this area. And part of what we want to do, and what Education Commission of the States is good at, is bringing folks from states together to talk about things like, how can we do this collaboration in more meaningful ways? Who needs to be at the table? How do we get them there? So I guess I'd encourage you to keep an eye on our work. The project is very new. It just started last month, so I don't have a whole lot to offer you right now. But by the end of the year, I think we will have had some really good discussions, and we'll certainly be able to offer some lessons learned at that point.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. We do have another question in the chat from Samantha. She comments, Pell expansion is also open to individuals receiving education in jails and other facilities that in Missouri fall outside the oversight of the Department of Corrections. How are these entities being coordinated and reviewed, approved in other states?
I do not know the answer to that question. I'm sorry to say, I don't want to say anything incorrect. I would love to follow up with you on that question, though. If you're interested, I can absolutely get you some more information on that. One thing that I don't think I mentioned before that may or may not be relevant to your question, there are going to be some additional regulations from the U.S. Department of Ed on how they're going to handle second chance Pell initiative sites who want to continue to offer programs under the expanded Pell. So I do think we're going to be seeing additional, well, I know we're going to be seeing additional guidance from the U.S. Department of Ed at some point, but I'm going to put my email in the chat, and if you don't mind dropping me a line with your question, I'd be really happy to follow up with you.
Thank you, Jennifer, for offering to do that. If anybody has any more questions, again, please put them over there in the chat, or you can, I believe you can take yourself off mute as well if you wish to just ask it out loud. Just a reminder that after this session, we will take a lunch break until 1 p.m. Here in a moment, I'm going to be putting the link to the agenda that's out there on the website, so you can access the following sessions. Those, again, will begin at 1 o'clock and go until 2:30, and you will have an option between 3 different sessions.
All right. Well, if nobody has any further questions, do feel free to reach out to me if you do. As I said, our project that we're beginning is really in its early stages, and I think we're going to have a lot of additional information to share over the next months. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I appreciate the questions and the conversation, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.